Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke, and today's guest is Tamar George. She is a psychic coach, artist, and author of several books, including My Life as Letty Lind. Today, we will be talking about how she can connect into past lives to better understand the greater view of reincarnation and why more people are remembering their own past lives. Tamar, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You are a psychic coach. How does that differ from being a medium?
A psychic coach is somebody that works with questions, and a medium works with those who passed over to the other side. There's definitely a difference there.
That's consistent with what a lot of us have been told before. So in other words, you don't really position yourself as a medium, you're a psychic coach.
Yes, okay. I am.
When did you learn that you had intuitive gifts?
I remember talking to my mother around the age 11, and somebody was coming over, and I described who they were and what they were about. And she said, "How do you know that?" And I answered, "How do you not know that?" That's when I realized I was different. Then as an adult, I learned to meditate with others, and I was receiving a lot of information that I could see, feel, and knew, especially stuff I didn't know. And others in that meditation group started asking me for information about their lives.
So the meditation group was a starting point for that. Is that where it blossomed from there, or did it happen later on?
I know it blossomed from there, definitely.
Okay, good. All right, so you've been working as a psychic almost 4 decades. Tell us how that journey started.
I call my intuition divine inspiration, and some would call it spirit guides. But no matter what you call it, I was getting advice. So there was a suggestion from my guidance that I take myself out there in the world and teach what I was learning. And I replied back, no, I wasn't going anywhere because I wasn't perfect. And the answer that I heard back in my head was, yeah, they would hate you if you were perfect. That's when I realized I was being asked to be perfect, to just teach back what was working for me. And they were also telling me that our lives are the greatest example of being a really good teacher.
So spirit guides, it seems to be that when people do talk about spirit guides and angels for that matter, it often is associated with intuitives like yourself being able to see spirits, people that have passed at a young age. You didn't have those experiences when you were younger, did you?
I did not. I consider spirit guides as information that comes to you from your higher self. Let's say you're doing a painting and you receive divine inspiration. The greatest paintings in the world were divinely inspired. Architecture, all of that. Where is that coming from? That's what I'm talking about, divine inspiration.
The greatest works of art, architecture and so forth, all were the result of divine inspiration. Let's take like Michelangelo, for example.
Right.
That one would seem like a pretty good candidate, but you're saying basically all the great works.
Yeah, and in some way and somehow it's like sacred geometry. They all fit what is perfect. Think about music that was created. It was divinely inspired.
Okay. Now, your website mentions something about Indigo children and star children. Who are they, and does that have anything to do with what people are calling Ascension?
I had clients coming to me telling me that their children just knew things. They thought maybe their child was an old soul, and they said, that child seems wise beyond their years. And they also learn things really fast, and they know things they should know at like 5 or 6. They were also very loving towards others. So those labels, indigo or star children, that's just what they are because it means old souls. Ascension is what we're in right now. We also call it the Aquarian Age. But it is the age from a fear experiment into a love experiment. And these kids are here to help. They're going to create changes in technology in order to help save each other and the planet. They definitely don't want our old world of greed, and they don't want to work 9 to 5 every day. They want more freedom, more joy.
How can you know for certain these kids are, in fact, what you would call an indigo child or a star child?
The only explanation I can give for that is the parents just know. And being around one of these children, you just know they have wisdom beyond their years. They'll point out when you're mean to an animal or point out when there's an inconsistency with the way an adult is behaving. They're wise.
Is it possible that these children come from other star systems or anywhere other than Earth?
That is a real possibility, but I believe that's true for all of us because we're multidimensional. We have eternity to explore and create in. So, yeah, we're just very limited. We're very much in our box here on Earth.
What exactly does multidimensional mean?
To me, it means that the great, great giant spirit of us has the ability to send pieces of its spirit. It's also been described like a drop in the ocean that's still water. It's a drop, but it's in the ocean. And we are able, as pieces of spirit, to be in other realms, to be in other places, to learn how to create. When you look at this planet, we're creating all the time. We're cloning animals. We're creating new technology. We're creating new plants. We're just constantly creating. And to think that it's limited by a 80-year time span or a 100-year time span in eternity is really limiting everything.
Limited thinking. Where do you suppose that actually comes from?
I think when we look back in history, we have been in the dark ages, this fear experiment. So we limited ourselves, we limited one another just to this amount of consciousness. But now we're hearing that consciousness is being raised. We have so much access to other information that once we get out there and start researching, we realize where the myths come from. Joseph Campbell did Occidental mythology, where he traces all the myths in history. It's an amazing book, amazing book. So that's why we're limited.
Now, you mentioned raising consciousness a moment ago and also what you called the fear experiment. Does the fear experiment have something to do with moving away from the male energy and moving towards the feminine energy, which is also related to what people call ascension, which I think has a lot to do with consciousness raising, more people waking up and so forth?
Yeah, we talk about the patriarchal system where the man has had more power on this planet. But what's coming back is this divine feminine with the divine masculine so that the misuse of power is no longer. We're in the age of unity.
We're there.
We're there right now.
That's the first time I've heard that. I always ask for a roadmap when someone brings this up. When are we going to get there? Is it going to be next year, next decade, next millennia? When is that going to happen?
No, we're in the Aquarian Age right now. So we have gone past the cusp of it and we have moved right into it. When we're watching our news, what's happening around the world is the old system, the patriarchal system, is holding on for dear life of still wanting power over others. And we're seeing that. We're all going through a very rough time. But the outcome is going to be that balance. It's going to be that joy. It's always been that probable of happiness.
Regarding the Aquarian Age, which we are supposedly in right now, do we have a reference point from thousands of years ago? There are people that talk about theories of how we move out of one age and into another. Where does the projection come from that we are currently moving into the Aquarian Age?
I think it comes from the Mayan calendar. It was a big deal in 2012 that the Earth was going to end. But what they were really saying is the Earth was going to end as we know it. So what was humanity going to do? Was it going to continue the old process, or was it going to have enough people waking up into their own consciousness, stepping out of the box? And that's what happened.
Okay.
That's when this shift occurred. That's when we moved into the Aquarian Age.
Speaking of the Mayans, which is always a very interesting topic, how long ago was that civilization in place? It was thousands of years ago, was it not?
I think even less time than that. The Mayans alive today would say, we're still here. That calendar?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know exactly when the calendar was created, but they had a really, really good system. It was cycles of patterns that they were researching and learning about
Right.
and writing down.
And speaking of cycles, there are theories that thousands and thousands of years ago, 5,000, 6,000, maybe even more like 10,000 years ago, there were civilizations that were more advanced than the one we're living in today. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Whenever someone talks about ascension, we often slip into that discussion about cycles, the great year concept where everything does go in cycles. And I asked about reference points because it would appear that the Egyptians, before the pharaohs, they were living in a time where some people might call it 5D, where telepathy was as normal as people speaking or people using their smartphones. I think that does tie into these discussions about indigo children and star children and things that do seem a little bit extraordinary. You agree?
Yes. To that person in that box, yes, it seems extraordinary.
Yes, exactly.
But to those of us who remember, which is my first book, Reborn in Time, which is the story of Atlantis, then the Atlanteans moved out. They had sister cities. They moved out from their land into the Egyptians, into the Mayans, into the Celtic people. And I traced those lives through past life regression, how we got more into the darker ages, how we misused the teachings even more. So it's quite an exciting journey.
To say the very least, since you brought it up, past lives going back quite a long time. You're talking about, I'm guessing here, 10,000, 12,000 years or more, which means during those past lives, you've seen the cycle that we're talking about. Enlightenment and then falling down into the dark ages, kind of like what America is in now, and hopefully coming out of. My Life as Letty Lind describes a past life of yours in Victorian England. So how did you discover that you had a life that long ago?
With my intuition, I had just seen her as a child. I just knew that I had been there. It was just a knowing. And I kept asking for a name, and I came up with Letty Lind. And this was all before the internet. So I went over in 1997 to London to look at the birth certificates in an official government building, and it was all handwritten names. But I couldn't find Letty Lind because that was not her official birth name.
Right.
So when the internet came into being around 2003, I typed in Letty Lind and up came a picture. And it was like, yes, she really does exist.
So what did it feel like when you saw the picture? What were your first impressions?
Just that excitement that I just portrayed. It was like, oh my gosh, yay, I'm onto something here. So I kept Googling. And in 2005, I found a guy named Graham from London who was doing a biography of Letty. And he kept emailing me, and I absolutely kept all of those emails. He wouldn't tell me what he was writing about. He wanted to know why I was interested in her.
You mentioned knowing that this person, this was one of your past lives. Is that a claircognizant knowing, or is it something different?
I just had been getting information from my guides, and I was trusting the information out to my clients. Why not trust them?
Right. So the information was coming from your spirit guides then.
Yes.
Right. And you actually had experiences remembering past lives going much farther back than Victorian England. Did you learn about that first, or did you learn about the life of Letty Lind and the previous lives after that?
It's like balls in the air. I was juggling all those lifetimes as I was writing my first book and recording information for this book. So it was all happening at once. I would keep finding more information and doing more regressions.
You initially got the information from your spirit guides, but the past life regression sessions, you learned even more. Can you give us an idea of what one of those sessions actually felt like?
They grew over time. So the more I trusted myself to do it, the more I would trust what I was getting. And the more I did it, like practice. So I just became better and better and better at those regressions, as well as my psychic ability. Reborn in Time took 10 years to write. My life as Letty Lind only took a couple months because I had gathered all the information.
For one of those sessions, when you did a past life regression, do you remember the type of questions that the therapist was asking you and how the process went, and some things you remembered? Did you have a recorder on, anything like that?
I didn't have a recorder on, and I always remembered it because I was visually seeing it and I was feeling it and I was there. So after the session, I would get up and I would write it down. I led the regression therapist in a lot of the questions because as I was telling the story, they would ask me a question that might not relate to where I was and where I was going. And I'd say, ask me this. And they were okay with that because I was getting all this information.
When you go into a session like that, you do a past life regression, how do you know it's not your imagination, that it's something much, in your case, that actually was a past life?
It's really that ability to trust. If you can work with your intuition and learn how to trust it, then you'll realize you're not making it up. Plus, a lot of times you're having feelings. And your brain knows where you're going with the sentence. In a past life regression, you don't know where you're going. You're watching it as it's happening. So there's no ending there. And that's another way between those feelings and watching the story develop. Those are two trust issues.
Really? Emotionally, what does it feel like when you go through that type of experience?
Well, sometimes you don't want to hear the information, and other times you're going, wow, I really felt a lot in that situation. The other thing is that is so similar to what I'm going through right now as a lesson.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about Letty Lind and your other lives going as far back as Atlantis. We might have to devote an entire episode just on that, but that's pretty amazing stuff. Letty Lind, who exactly was she? Because you've obviously nailed it down to a certain period in Victorian England. Who was she?
Letty was an actress. She was also a dancer. She was very well known for her long performances on the stage. She was born in 1861 and died in 1923. And this life, I was born in 1947.
How did you know that she lived during a period of Victorian England? How did you know that it was during that time, other than what the researcher told you?
The researcher only confirmed it.
Okay.
But I could see it. I could see her dancing. I could see her on stage. It all felt just so familiar.
What else is significant about the lifetime of this person?
What's really interesting, I did a regression on my husband.
Mm-hmm.
And after I had met Graham, the researcher, we talked about what else did I know? And I said, well, I did this regression on my husband, and he came up with a lifetime as King Edward, which was really surprising. Letty was born in the same year that King Edward, Victoria's oldest son, was promiscuous. My final proof was the fact that I finally found that there was a person named Lord Esher that was in charge of Letty's will. And Lord Esher talked to King Edward every single day. So how come Lord Esher was put in charge of this singer and this dancer in King Edward's will? And that connected the two. That was my proof.
Okay, so what relationship did Letty have to King Edward?
Well, she was his child.
Oh, wow.
Born out of wedlock when he was very, very young.
Okay.
Yes.
This brings us to another question. Why do you suppose so many people have connections to famous people in their past lives?
I'm okay with all of that because in that bigger picture, we all are creator energy. We all are one. But I had a client who thought she was Marie Antoinette. And when we did further research on it, she found out she was in the court of Marie Antoinette. So a lot of people associate. Their brain goes right away with what is known. They're meditating and they've got this figure of light in their mind screen, and they think it must be Jesus because that's the only figure of light that they could possibly relate it to.
There are more light beings than Master Jesus, as some people refer to him as. 300 people that claim to be Marie Antoinette or the Queen of Sheba probably are not all that accurate, right?
Not unless they really do a lot more regressions, a lot more research, not unless they really find those details. They really move along that path. Like I did with Letty Lind, it was, here's the proof, which I lay out in the book, the linear proof that happens all along the way that convinces me I was indeed her.
Right.
Why would this happen?
This isn't the only past life you've had, apparently, right? You've had more than one.
Oh, yeah.
You also did visit London to find her grave or your grave. What was that like?
I had been emailing Graham, and he was writing this pamphlet about the life of Letty Lind, which he did not share any of it with me. So I met him in Windsor at the train station, and we went off to Letty's grave. He got mad at me when we were standing at the grave, saying, "You're not paying your respects." And I said, "Bones, how you doing in there?" I said, "Graham, I'm right here." So then we went off to the church, and I sat down and read the booklet. And all of a sudden, I came upon the date. Letty's funeral was Friday, August 31st. And I went, "Oh my God, Graham, come here, come here." I said, "What date is this today?" And he looked at me strangely and he said, "It's Friday, August 31st.
Really?
And I went, "Oh my God, 84 years later, I'm sitting in the church on Friday, August 31st, the same day as my funeral." Letty died when she was 61. In a month and a half, I was going to be 61 years old. Total proof for how can that happen?
There does seem to be quite a few coincidences there. We all know what intuitors think about coincidence. Many of them say there is no such thing. So going back to the discussion about ascension and moving away from one energy to another, whether it be the divine feminine or the divine feminine and the divine masculine, why do you suppose more people today are remembering their own past lives?
I believe that the ability to raise our consciousness, to meditate, to spend that more time in yoga is helping with those scenes and that understanding. Our past lives are in our aura around our body. So we're able to connect into that record that exists around us. That's where it is. We have a lot of information in the auric field around us.
The auric field that you just mentioned, is there any connection to the Akashic records? Might that actually be the same thing?
I believe there are two different sort of teachings. The Akashic records are saying all your records are held in this place. And I'm saying all your records are held around you. Why can't it be both?
Could be.
I think from being a psychic, what people don't know is everything is known about you. As a psychic, I'm only privy to so much information. And I always ask for the highest good. So it has to be for your highest good. But everything is known.
I've never heard that before. That does harken back to the concept of the records, where apparently past, present, and future are happening all at once. That's a pretty hard concept to get your head around. But the auric field, that seems to imply that it's in our energy field, does it not?
Yes.
Okay. Does that have anything to do with how a shaman would conduct a shamanic journey or a session of their practice?
I'm a person that doesn't ever say absolutes, because the more I know, the more I don't know. So, and I don't know their process, but it is very likely that they were tapping into something that they were getting results from. If you're getting results from the process that you're doing, you keep doing it. It's working.
That's true. What do you think are some of the most important takeaways from your experience of remembering your past lives?
I think that because we live in such a racist society, that we're saying we're better than, and that's gone on for thousands of years, that when we finally figure out that we're all one, that the great gigantic spirit of who we are chooses to put a part or a piece of its spirit in a human costume and live out this life, that if we are very negative against another race, then that is our choice the next time around, is to come back into that race to learn love, compassion, understanding. So people don't realize the karma that they're building. And we are coming into a time where we are going to all say, we are all one.
Really?
I even believe the religions out there are going to say, we're all one.
So what you're talking about is basically reincarnation. And you also mentioned religion. So in your experience of all the past lives that you have remembered and viewed, and how does that change your view of spirituality and religion, if it's changed at all?
Well, it has changed, because I believe I was living in a very limited box that only saw things a certain way. And by jumping out of that box and experiencing all of these other past lives and my psychic abilities, experiencing all of that, I was realizing the Creator created everything. And if the Creator created everything, then that Creator energy is within us. That energy within us then moves out into Earth experiment to create. And we have free will. We can create the good, the bad, the ugly, or we can create a joy-filled life. But our subconscious thoughts are doing the creation. Believe it or not, it's not that much of the consciousness. It's more of the deep subconscious fears or desires that are manifesting themselves in the future. There is no future. We are just in the now, and in that now, we are manifesting what that subconscious is believing. So that's part of my psychic ability, is to get into that subconscious and say, do you want to create this? Are you sure you want to go down this path? And I'm not allowed to give so much information that would interfere with that path, or I have karma with it.
Really? So you see information pertaining to one of your clients, but you know what to divulge and what not to divulge? Is that how that works?
How to say it. Like, here's the probability, but you have free will to change this. What you're creating doesn't look that good. Let's back it up, change the thought pattern, figure out why you have that fear, desire, whatever it is you're manifesting, and let's move on to create something that really would be joy-filled.
Okay, have to like that. Last question here. With the explosion of mediums and intuitives and empaths and psychics, when do you think we will see the day when psychics, for example, are as commonplace as psychotherapists?
39 years ago, when I first started out, I didn't have many people relating to me at all. But now I have a whole lot of people that understand what I'm saying, are okay with the fact that I'm a psychic coach, way more accepting because they're wanting to know more about their own intuition.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Excellent. Tamar, thanks so much for joining us today. Very cool information, very informative. How do our listeners find out more about you online?
It is tamargeorge.com. So Tamar is Tamar, George, George.com.
Excellent. I will put that in the show notes and the transcript as well. You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing. You can also leave us a review on iTunes as well. Thanks so much again for listening, and we'll see you next time.